You are not late, and you are not behind. What is happening right now is not a mistake. It is not punishment. It is not the universe changing its mind. You are being prepared for what you already asked for, and preparation rarely looks like progress. It looks like stillness. It looks like confusion. It looks like the old fire going quiet. That is why this phase scares people. They think momentum is gone. They think desire is fading. They think they lost alignment. But what is actually happening is much deeper than motivation. Something inside you is being reorganized. The version of you that made the request cannot be the same version that receives it. Something has to shift first. You might feel less driven than before, less obsessed, less hungry. Things that once felt urgent now feel optional. Goals that once consumed your thoughts no longer carry the same weight. This does not mean you stopped wanting more. It means your system is recalibrating. When the inner structure changes, the outer push softens. The mind interprets this as loss. But it is not loss. It is adjustment. You are being moved out of survival mode and into stability. And stability feels boring to a system that learned how to function through pressure. Most people assume preparation feels like effort, like discipline, like pushing harder. But real preparation feels like subtraction, less noise, less emotional charge, less need to prove. The urgency drains out first, the attachment loosens next, and then comes the quiet. That quiet makes people nervous because it removes familiar signals. No constant stress, no constant anticipation, no constant chasing. Without those, the old identity has nothing to cling to. This is why it feels like nothing is happening, because the changes are not external yet, they are internal. And internal change always comes before visible results. The field does not move objects first, it adjusts the observer. When you asked for something new, you did not trigger a series of events. You triggered a reorganization of probability, and probability cannot settle into form if your internal state is still tuned to an old version of reality. You are learning to tolerate neutrality, to exist without constant stimulation, to sit in space without rushing to fill it. This is not laziness. This is not giving up. This is capacity being built. Your nervous system is releasing old predictions. Your brain is loosening familiar reward loops. That drop in excitement is not collapse. It is flexibility. It is the system saying the old patterns are no longer required. Spiritually, this is the space between identities. You do not feel like who you were, but you are not fully anchored in who you are becoming. That in-between space feels uncomfortable because it has no reference points. There is nothing to chase and nothing to fix. And for a system trained to equate movement with safety, that feels threatening. This is where most people interfere. They panic. They force goals. They add pressure. They repeat affirmations without presence. They try to manufacture momentum, not because it is needed, but because stillness exposes how addicted the old identity was to effort. Every time they do that, they pull themselves back into the old frequency. The field responds by pausing, not to punish, to protect coherence. What you asked for is not late. It is waiting for compatibility. And compatibility is not built through effort. It is built through release, through letting go of the internal habits that would fracture the reality you are calling in if it arrived too soon. That is why preparation feels like clearing. Less attachment, less emotional volatility, less internal noise. You are not being emptied because you lack something. You are being cleared because something new requires space. Trust becomes necessary here, not blind trust, structural trust, the kind that remains when there is no evidence yet. This is where intuition sharpens, not in a dramatic way, in a practical way. You become more aware of timing. You sense when to move and when not to. You stop forcing clarity. You let it come to you. If you feel disconnected from your old life, but not anxious about what is next, you are not lost. You are being repositioned. The version of you that asked for this cannot receive it in the same internal posture. Something has to shift first, and that shift is already happening. This phase is not asking you to do more. It is asking you to stop interrupting, to stop demanding proof before the internal adjustment is complete, to recognize that preparation feels invisible only because it is happening at the level that determines everything else. What you asked for already exists as a probability, and probability collapses into reality only when the observer is stable enough to experience it as normal. The hardest part of preparation is that it gives the mind nothing to measure, no milestones, no clear feedback, no external signs that say you are on the right path. And because the mind was trained to equate movement with progress, it labels this phase as stagnation. But stagnation is rigid. What you are experiencing is fluid. It is open. It is adjustable. When preparation begins, energy is not added. Interference is removed. And removal feels empty to a system that has identified with effort for a long time. The silence is not absence. It is space being created. That is why life feels slower. Conversations feel repetitive. Old ambitions feel irrelevant. Situations that once triggered emotional reactions no longer hook you the same way. This does not mean you stopped caring. It means your nervous system is no longer reacting from survival patterns. From a quantum perspective, probability collapses when noise decreases. The field does not respond to chaos. It responds to clarity. And clarity requires subtraction before addition. Neuroscience explains this clearly. Before a major identity update, dopamine-driven motivation drops. Familiar reward loops loosen. The chase loses appeal. This is not depression. It is disengagement from patterns that are no longer aligned. The brain is clearing bandwidth. That is why this phase feels neutral. Not happy, not sad, just quiet. Neutrality feels unsettling if you have spent most of your life oscillating between desire and frustration. But neutrality is where reorganization happens. It is where new internal predictions can form without being overridden by old expectations. Spiritually, this phase has been described as a void or a wilderness, not because it is empty, but because it strips away false direction. This is where trust is misunderstood. Trust is not believing something good will happen. Trust is allowing the process to unfold without demanding reassurance at every step. And the universe tests this through stillness. It removes distractions and watches whether you rush to refill the space. Many people do. They panic at the quiet. They return to overthinking and overdoing, not because action is required, but because the old identity feels unsafe without movement. Every time they do this, they reactivate the old signal. Preparation asks for restraint, not inactivity. Restraint from interference, the ability to notice when you are about to fill the space with noise and choose not to. This is not discipline. This is awareness. Your relationship with time is changing. You feel less rushed, less reactive, more selective. That alone changes outcomes even before anything external shifts. You may notice intuition becoming clearer. You sense when something is off. You sense when to wait. You stop forcing answers. This is coherence forming. And coherence is what the field recognizes as readiness. Preparation does not feel good in the way motivation feels good. It feels stable, grounded, less emotional. And that lack of emotion tricks the mind into thinking nothing important is happening. But the biggest changes rarely announce themselves. They integrate quietly. They feel obvious only later. If you are here, your job is not to accelerate. Acceleration fractures coherence. Your job is to stay present, without defining what comes next. To allow the old internal structure to dismantle without rebuilding it too soon. This is the part of manifestation that cannot be rushed. It determines whether what arrives will stay. The field is not withholding anything. It is ensuring stability before collapse. And once stability is achieved, effort is no longer required. Recognition is, you will recognize it, because nothing inside you will argue with it. That is how you know preparation is complete. What you asked for did not fail because it was too big. It paused because the version of you who asked could not sustain it yet. Manifestation teachings often skip this part. Not every desire can land inside the same identity that created it. The field delivers states of being, and every state requires regulation. If that regulation is missing, outcomes arrive and collapse. That is why some people receive quickly and lose just as fast. The external change arrives before the internal system can hold it. Old coping strategies resurface. The identity fractures under the weight of what it received. What you are being prepared for now is not just the thing. It is the version of you that can live inside it without destabilizing it. The brain is wired for familiarity. When something exceeds what the nervous system recognizes as normal, it feels unsafe, even if it is positive. Preparation teaches the system that the new reality is safe, sustainable, familiar, and that learning happens through reduced urgency, increased presence, and release of control. This is where patience becomes embodied, not waiting, not hoping, but staying present without demanding proof, staying open without micromanaging timing, staying grounded while identity stabilizes. When that stabilization happens, manifestation speeds up without force. Things align naturally. Decisions feel cleaner. Opportunities feel obvious. Movement happens at the right moment because internal timing matches external timing. That is preparation completing itself. If you feel less desperate, less reactive, less obsessed with outcomes, that does not mean you stopped wanting what you asked for. It means you are becoming compatible with it. The universe is not asking you to want less. It is asking you to stabilize more. Stability is not built through effort. It is built through release. What you asked for is not waiting on time. It is waiting on identity. Once identity locks in, reality responds immediately. Trust at this level is not optimism. It is not positive thinking. It is what remains when the need to interfere disappears. As long as you feel the urge to check and control, part of you is still anchored to the old version. Collapse happens when observation stabilizes, not when desire peaks, not when emotion intensifies. Oscillation delays, steadiness completes. Control was never leverage, it was compensation. When the nervous system relaxes, perception sharpens, timing improves. You stop bracing against life. Trust feels boring because there is no drama, and boredom is a sign of regulation. Impatience delays more than doubt. Impatience declares the present moment insufficient. The field responds to that immediately. Trust says, I do not need to interfere. In the final phase you feel the urge to act, and you do not. Not from fear, from clarity. Action is not required yet. Timing is, and timing cannot be forced. Synchronicity increases quietly. Information arrives when needed. Conversations land differently. Things feel obvious instead of lucky. You stop watching the door. You stay available. The moment you truly trust, you stop caring about when it arrives. That release is often what allows it to arrive. Trust says, I am ready without supervision. If you feel calm without answers, steady without guarantees, this is not giving up. This is alignment. Manifestation does not feel magical here. It feels natural. You do not need more understanding. You need stability, neutrality with readiness, calm with availability. That is when probability collapses cleanly. There is no emotional climax, just a quiet internal click. You stop chasing clarity. You stop rehearsing the future. You are present. This is where people doubt the quiet. They expect fireworks, but subtlety is alignment. Loud change belongs to unstable systems. You do not need to announce your growth. You do not need to prove alignment. Consistency matters more than effort now. Move when movement feels clean. Wait when waiting feels neutral. Stop forcing meaning into delays. What you asked for was never blocked. It was sequencing itself around the version of you that no longer interferes. When it arrives, it will not feel dramatic. It will feel like recognition, because the truth is simple. You are never being delayed. You are being prepared. And preparation ends the moment you stop asking for proof. Now comes the phase most people misunderstand. Not the waiting, not the silence, but the return of movement. Because when preparation completes, life does not explode forward. It resumes, gently, naturally, almost casually. And that subtle return is easy to miss if you are still expecting intensity to signal progress. This is where reality starts responding without asking for your permission. Small things shift first. Conversations open in unexpected ways. Decisions feel lighter. You stop rehearsing what to say. You stop bracing for outcomes. You move when it makes sense and pause when it does not. There is no rush, no dramatic push, and that is how you know this movement is real. The old version of you moved from pressure, from fear of missing out, from the need to control timing. This version moves from clarity, and clarity does not shout, it simply directs. You are not trying to manifest anymore. You are responding. That is a major difference. You may notice that effort feels inefficient now. Forcing feels exhausting. Overthinking feels obvious. Your system rejects what is not aligned almost instantly. Not with emotion, with neutrality. You simply lose interest in what does not fit. That is integration happening. Integration is the phase where the new identity settles in, where the internal shift becomes normal. This is why nothing feels dramatic. Drama belongs to transition. Stability belongs to arrival. The field is no longer adjusting around you. It is matching you. This is also where old patterns try one last time to resurface. Not because you failed, but because the system checks for consistency. Old doubts may whisper. Old habits may tempt. Not strongly, quietly. And how you respond matters. If you react with fear, you signal instability. If you observe without engaging, the pattern dissolves. This is where maturity shows, not in doing more, in doing less without guilt, in choosing presence over performance. You might notice that you are less interested in explaining yourself, less interested in convincing anyone, less interested in proving progress. That is because validation is no longer part of your signal. You are no longer broadcasting for approval. You are broadcasting coherence, and coherence attracts without effort. It rearranges circumstances efficiently. You do not chase opportunities. You recognize them. You do not force connections. They form naturally. You do not push outcomes. They align. This is the stage where people often say things just worked out, but that is not accurate. Things stabilized first. Stability is invisible. That is why most people miss it. They think nothing is happening because nothing feels intense. But intensity was never the goal. Sustainability was what you are stepping into now is not exciting in the old way. It is reliable, grounded, repeatable, and that is what allows it to last. You are no longer preparing, you are inhabiting, living inside the internal posture that can hold what arrives. This is why you feel different but cannot fully explain why. Your reactions changed, your timing changed, your relationship with control changed. The mind may still look for confirmation. That habit does not disappear overnight, but now it does not run the system. Awareness does. Presence does. You notice the urge to check, and it passes. You notice the urge to rush, and it fades. This is regulation, and regulation is what keeps reality stable once it shifts. Without it, manifestations spike and collapse. With it, they integrate into daily life. You might also notice that what arrives does not look exactly like what you imagined, not because you aimed wrong, but because imagination was limited by the old identity. Reality delivers something more precise, something that fits who you are now. This is why disappointment does not arise. Even if the form is different, the feeling is right, the fit is right. That is the marker of alignment, not excitement. Fit. You are no longer scanning for signs, you are living. And life responds differently to someone who is not watching it constantly. The field does not need to be monitored. It needs to be met. This is also where gratitude becomes natural, not forced, not practiced, natural. Because you are no longer trying to get somewhere else. You are here. And from here, movement happens without struggle. If nothing big has announced itself yet, that does not mean this phase is incomplete. Big shifts often arrive after normalcy settles, after the system proves it can remain stable without excitement. The universe does not rush what needs to last. It confirms stability before expanding further. That is not delay. That is intelligence. So if you feel steady, less reactive, less dramatic, more clear, you are not stuck, you are integrated. The preparation did its job. From here, your role is simple. Stay consistent, stay present, respond instead of forcing. Let life meet you without supervision. You do not need to protect the outcome. You are the outcome. The internal environment is now compatible. That is why what comes next will not feel earned or miraculous. It will feel obvious, and when it arrives fully, you may barely notice the moment, because nothing inside you will resist it. Nothing will question it. Nothing will rush it. That is how you know this chapter is real. Not because it feels big, but because it feels right. You are not being tested. You are being tuned. And now the signal is clear.